Hey there! Thanks for tuning into this special anniversary episode of Advanced TV Herstory, a podcast unlike any other you listen to, I'm guessing. I'd like to share with you some news and thoughts as I embark on year 6 of this podcast. And you know what? It's such a momentous time in American and world history that it just bears some reflection, I would say. What a year it has been. First, I want to kind of be proud about the fact that we developed a new tagline, connecting the dots of TV and feminism to politics and culture. And it's taken 5 years to get there, because this podcast has gone from simply celebrating and revisiting great TV women and their work, whether it's behind the scenes or in front of the camera, to an approach that is framed more within the political and cultural conversations we're having today. We realize now more than ever that media and TV is incredibly powerful. And we talk about representation and pay equity and talent pipelines and the power of the major media corporate conglomerates who are now capturing a hold on all the titles, past and present. All of that impacts streaming. All of that impacts whether or not you get to see your favorite show, which is a tremendous thing if you were growing up at a time where the resources, the number of channels were limited, and in order to grab something and watch it again, you had to put it on your VCR. We don't have VCRs anymore. Think about that. So that's why we talk about this stuff, because it's all intertwined, and it goes back to those very other topics of representation and pay equity and talent pipelines. It's all tied together, and we are the audience. Second, and before I say another word about Advanced TV Herstory, I'd like to share some big thank yous that are in order. First, to Catherine Yang, who is our talented sound editor, content editor, wow. She's also an accomplished musician and composer. We'd like to thank Jazzer for having composed Take Me Higher, which has become our little musical jingle, which I found at freemusicarchive.org many years ago. I'm grateful that Ashley Pacini of The Real Women, which is an entertainment networking group, has become a collaborator of Advanced TV Herstory as well as a longtime listener. And thank you to the many women who advise, encourage, and put up with my rabbit hole tangents, and also to my family, Dave, Grant, and Allison, who serve on a moment's notice as editors and proofreaders of all sorts of content I send their way, scripts, e-newsletters, that sort of thing. Lastly, and most importantly, I'd like to thank you for your consistent listening and sharing with others. When I close each episode with the line, "You're why I podcast," it's because it's true. May you find each episode you listen to informative, inspiring, or just plain enjoyable. And if you don't, I certainly hope you'll let me know. Now let's take a quick look back at the year that was. Last summer, I released the Broadcast 41 series, which was backboned by a lengthy in-person recording session with Dr. Carol Stabile of the University of Oregon. And on that busy day, in addition to recording a lot of audio, we also appeared on Oregon Public Broadcasting's Think Out Loud program. It was wonderful of her to set up this media opportunity, fun to have someone else asking the questions, and a great joy to meet and spend the day with Carol. And that series also tapped expertise from the other side of the country, Dr. Charlene Regester of the University of North Carolina. She is the author of the book African American Actresses, The Struggle for Visibility, 1900 to 1960. And it nicely dovetailed with Stabile's research on the Broadcast 41. Now bear with me, here's the parallel. Stabile's book goes into great depth about the toxic masculinity of the late 40s, which sought out women of all nationalities and religions and political beliefs, and in many cases ruined their careers with unfounded allegations. Among them, that list of 41 women, were women who were also featured in Dr. Register's book, women who had been African American actresses 1900 to 1960. And the deal is that they had toiled in film, they had long careers in film, but they were only limited to the roles that were available to black women, which were specifically as a domestic, a housekeeper, a nanny, or as a torch singer. And the thing that should stick with you from here on out, an understanding that I didn't totally have until I chatted with Dr. Regester, is that the singer's footage that was shot for any one of these films could be edited out of the film. So the singer sang, but the singer was not an integral part of the plot. She could be edited out of the film so that it could be released to Southern audiences in the 40s and the 50s and even the 60s. When we think about the public conversations going on now in the summer of COVID and reckoning with systemic racism following the murder of George Floyd, I am grateful for that time with Dr. Regester, because she taught me that you really need to probe into the details of something that doesn't seem quite right to understand the hatred and the power that was behind it. It's been a year where I consciously balanced those kinds of series, which are based on extended interviews, like the one I did with Dr. Elena Levine and all her research on soap operas, with the episodes and the people that are worth further study, sometimes just involving me, narrations and clips. Like the episode L.A. Law's Pilot and 80s Feminism, which was all about the series' explosive launch and was intended to be this incredibly progressive workplace drama. Each episode's quality dropped a bit in the first season, 1986 and 1987. A chat with series co-creator Terry Louise Fisher is officially, I say this out loud, officially on the podcast's bucket list, because I believe Terry Louise Fisher has a story to tell. In this series that she co-created with Stephen Bochco, something happened behind the scenes that led to Fisher's removal from the show, and if I get a chance, someday I want to ask her what she had in mind for the swankily decorated offices of Mackenzie Brackman Law Firm, what she had in mind for law partner Ann Kelsey's career, and what some of those let's confront the issues freshness that never saw the light of day. L.A. Law and Fisher, as a showrunner, held such potential. Rewatching the first two seasons, it's kind of painful, because knowing that she was removed from the series, that there was a real separation there, it's clear that the forces behind the scenes didn't want the series or its co-creator to become a feminist force. And 35 years later, I feel like we need to hear the story. Rewatching L.A. Law was part of my research for the book I pledged last year to write. Now, the good news is my framework of research and focus on the #MeToo movement exists, and I still love it. It's not going away, and it's worth the investment in time. I believe it will create an accessible way to learn relevant background about sexual harassment in the U.S. workplace. The bad news, listeners, is that I simply cannot bring myself to write it as a book for any audience. So I am currently exploring platforms from which to launch well-researched and engaging modules for everybody to enjoy. Stay tuned for more in the months to come. In last year's episode 2, I shared with you my multiple dreams featuring Jane Fonda. By the end of 2019, there were 4 in all, and each was rich enough for me to remember upon waking. So 4 dreams intrigued me enough to buy Jane's 2005 memoir, My Life So Far. Wow. That's all I can say. It is memorable. It is incredibly well written, and she sets straight a lot of misinformation about her life, that through the years her reputation was framed more by the men who feared her in her independence and power than by the women who just wanted a little bit of her nerve and resourcefulness. I am currently developing a multi-episode discussion of Jane's book. Please, listeners, buy it and read it if you haven't already. 2005, Jane Fonda's My Life So Far. And if you're wondering about Jane's connection to TV, well, there are many, as you might expect, but the one you may not know about is the 1987 made-for-TV movie that earned her an Emmy. It's entitled The Doll Maker. It's available on YouTube, complete with commercials. This is Jane in a project that she crafted and made come to life, and it will just simply blow you away. The link to that YouTube movie is in the show notes. And as if receiving a call from our feminist mothers, I finished Blanche Wiesen-Cook's final book in her 3-part Eleanor Roosevelt series. I read Gloria Steinem's 1983 Outrageous Acts and Everyday Rebellions, one of her first books, and she's written many. And clearly, and this goes to the episode I produced with out of an interview with April Smith, we talked about Mrs. America, the FX series, and April Smith and I talked about the historical basis of that series. And clearly, They used some of Steinem's very detailed and rich recount of the campaign to ratify the ERA in the storytelling of Mrs. America. And if you haven't seen that series yet, 9 episodes, I really, really recommend it. This reading, Eleanor Roosevelt, Gloria Steinem, Jane Fonda, it all further informs my capacity to put TV herstory into context, and it reminds me that change requires years of hard work, often with little understanding or recognition at the time. That's where our resilience and our tenacity and our persistence comes in so handy. And more in our Advanced TV Herstory monthly e-newsletter, I share what I'm reading and watching. If you don't already receive it, go to tvherstory.com and sign up today. So, having reached the 5-year milestone, Advanced TV Herstory is a known commodity, and it occupies a distinct space in the podcast world, serving an audience that spans academia, fandom, and feminism, and you. If there's a silver lining to this pandemic, and whoa, I wish I didn't have to say that, I believe it's that the interruption of what we thought was our focus and need-to-do list has caused us to pause and reflect on life and what we value. But at the same time, it also has pushed us to Zoom and countless other video platforms to serve as existing and essential bridges to new people, not just our own pre-COVID circle. And that's kind of exciting. I got to admit, the year to come is so full of variables, I don't dare craft a plan. I don't have that much to tell you about where we're going. But the smartest thing we can do is to remain flexible and mindful of all the changing conditions, and continue to evaluate how that change impacts us, personally, professionally, and even our hobbies and interests. If you're familiar with change theory, you know that chaos, and that definitely is a word that describes where we are today in midsummer 2020. Chaos is the time to be observant, and what follows chaos is a time of bold experimentation, innovation, and renewed energy. Listeners, I can certainly look back at the past year, and I can tell you that we're in for the 6th year of Advanced TV Herstory, but I have to say I have no idea what that future will bring. But I do know we, as a collective, need to be ready to contribute to one that upholds our values, respects people from all walks of life, and leverages the common ethics of work, health, and security. I'll do what I can with this podcast to remain open to collaborating and exploring other platforms and media, and examining issues that are controversial and inviting persons from all walks to join me behind the microphone. This is why I have no advertisements or sponsorships, because I want the final say over a script or episode. So please send me a message at advancedtvherstory@gmail.com or use the contact form at tvherstory.com. Let me know what you think the future holds or what you'd like us to include in this coming year of the podcast. We are all in this together, and you're why I podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.